Today we're going to talk about what makes someone beautiful. There's a couple concepts that I want to reinforce here that I have mentioned in a blog about a year ago actually, and it's something that I repeat every single day, and I find that if I have to repeat something every day, it's probably important, and probably someone hasn't read my blog. So I hope this video has a little bit more of a widespread appeal. Let's talk about two words, balance and symmetry. Now what do those mean and what are the significance of each one? Oftentimes when someone comes to me, their focus is on symmetry, making sure that one side equals the other. There's oftentimes in the animal world we tend to start saying, you know what, a mate chooses another mate because of symmetry. There's been studies that show that. I will tell you, yes, possibly, but I think it's way overplayed. I find oftentimes, to make this easier for you to understand, there are three levels of symmetry. There's going to be symmetry which only you can see, and believe it or not, I had a nice lady yesterday say, but Dr. Lamb, you can see my asymmetric upper lip, right? I said, no. And I was staring at her upper lip until my eyes were bleeding. I couldn't see it. And I had two staff members take a look at it. They couldn't see it. Now, if no one can see it and that person can see it, is that really relevant to anyone else? And the answer is no. It's a waste of your time and money and effort to even think about trying to fix that symmetry because no one can see what you're talking about. So that is important. You say, well, why could that person see it and no one else sees it? The reason is that person is really close to the mirror. Oftentimes it's a woman trying to put makeup on and every little tiny flaw looks bad, and their vocabulary is that symmetry is bad, so therefore they're trying, asymmetry is bad, therefore they're trying to fix that symmetry. The next level of symmetry is that, okay, I can see it. Now there's obvious a little bit of asymmetry. The brow is not quite the same as the other side, whatever, the nose is slightly off. But I'll be honest with you on that regard as well. That degree of asymmetry, first of all, is not that important. It sounds like it's important for beauty and aesthetics, and it really is not. And so why is that? Well, I would say a couple things would be intriguing for you is that go ahead and take, if you know how to do Photoshop, take half of your face and flip it to the other side, and you'll see that a perfectly symmetrical face actually looks bizarre. The second thing to understand is that if you have a perfectly symmetrical face, besides looking bizarre, I would say that it's not achievable. I mean, there's one part of my consent form I repeat every single day, and I have Donna, who does my pre-ops with me, underline and underscore it for you, is that the two sides of the body are not the same and can never be made the same. So symmetry oftentimes is way overplayed. People really focus that symmetry is something so important when it really is not. What's the third level of symmetry or asymmetry? It's really a deformity. And that's when one cheek is over here, one eye is over here. And when does that qualitatively change? Well, that's where it comes into the eye of the aesthetic surgeon to make that judgment. Is the symmetry so strong that it actually takes away from someone's attractiveness or makes it look like you can't avoid but looking at that asymmetry? And if you want to see that level of asymmetry, just go to my reconstructive files and you will see those photos where people have half a cheek missing or they've got one nose way over on one side or the brow is sitting over here because of some kind of weird tumor paralysis. Those things, yes, take away from your beauty. And that point, symmetry is worth fixing. But that category is actually quite extreme compared to where most people look at asymmetry. So I want to replace the word symmetry with the idea of balance. Now, what does that mean? Let me explain to you what I mean by balance first of all. Balance means that each part of the face works with another part of the face. They're in the same proportionate size. The different parts of the nose work together, the tip, the sides of the nose, the bridge, the cheeks to the eyes to the nose to the lips, and the lips to the top, bottom lip, and how the lips match the chin. Those things are where an aesthetic eye falls into place. Oftentimes you may think, well, does Dr. Lamb follow the rule of thirds, which is vertically this way, and rule of fifths, separating the eyes, the nose, and the ears? These are sort of these golden proportion parameters. I will tell you, no, I go by my eye. It's very important that the aesthetic surgeon looks at something and makes a judgment based on his judgment than rather than these arbitrary rules. Arbitrary rules don't help. They oftentimes hinder. An example is I had a lady, I mentioned this in another video log, that said, you know, do you go by the rule of fifths? And I was looking at her nose and she wanted to follow the rule of fifths. If I followed the rule of fifths, I would have worsened her nose. So this is what's so interesting is you have to go to someone that's artistic, that has a good eye, and can make judgment based on what you would benefit from, and based on your ethnicity, based on your gender, based on your age, based on what your desires are, and putting everything together. Now, let's use an example to have you understand balance and proportion a little bit better. What I'm talking about are these components of the face working together. Let's imagine for a moment a television screen. Let's be fancy. Let's call it a plasma television screen, a large 42-inch. I've got a glass of water floating on this screen. And this glass of water has no other reference points. There's no orange next to it. There's no individual standing next to it. And I ask you, how big is this glass of water? You have really no idea. You can't tell me, except maybe it's the size on the screen. But if I put a glass of water, the same look as the previous one, about that small to it, this one just appears larger, okay? It appears larger. And if you take one that's 15 times the size of that one and put on the screen, it appears smaller. That's how you can actually create balance to the face. Here's some examples. I have a lot of ethnic rhinoplasties, Asian, Hispanic, African American, that comes in. They want the sides reduced because they see their nose is too big. What's very interesting is that the alar portion right out here is actually quite tiny. The central lobule is really, really big and thick, where I've got to work to get that reduced. And when I bring this in, all of a sudden the central lobule just flares up like a balloon. It looks terrible. So understand that that's important, that you start thinking about balance. Or I have someone that says, my nose is too big, fix it, and it's an ethnic nose where the bridge here is too low. And I said, I've got to raise your bridge to make your tip look smaller. And I've got these examples on my website that make things much clearer, and I show that to the person. So also, lips. This morning I just did a lip reduction on the bottom lip because the gentleman thought the lip was too hanging, and I could see the imbalance between the two lips. Now the two lips are more in balance and proportion. So the idea behind balance and proportion is, how do I, as an aesthetic facial plastic surgeon, look at your face and create harmony? Not to change your identity radically unless it's like a large hump reduction or something else that I want to soften those features. But the idea is, when I look at balance and proportion, is how each part of the face works with the adjoining or adjacent structure or around it. So those are things that are very, very important that you have to think about. One example that also is very interesting, I had a lady that came to me and said, you know, my nose is getting bigger. And I said, no. If you think about Leonardo da Vinci, and he talks about how the nose grows and hangs, yeah, I've got a couple examples of that on my website of aging nose. It usually happens in much older gentlemen where the cartilages sag and the ligaments between the cartilage sag, so the whole nose starts to drop. But that occurs much later in life. If you're in your 40s and 50s and you find, like, why is my nose getting bigger? It's actually because the nose is primarily hard architecture and the face is primarily soft architecture or soft tissue. And soft tissue is far outweighs bone loss. So you lose a lot of soft tissue, so the face falls away faster than the nose. The nose becomes larger in proportion to the rest of the face. It has not gotten bigger, the face has gotten smaller, and your perception is that the nose has gotten larger. So these are the things that I work with every day, is to look at balance proportion. So when you pay for not just a technician, when you come to me, you pay for someone with an aesthetic eye. Hopefully this idea between balance proportion versus symmetry was helpful.